Silverthorne off the boards, gets the break, goes with him. Silverthorne puts it onto the back post. Puts it into the back post, and it goes forward from Macaulay Hayward, having the right hand over the top, throwing it in, and Miller's going toe to toe, and he's got 3 or 4 headshots, and then drags him down. Still has it. Zabo being sort of marked out the game by Tom, and the shot comes forward now. Babrea with plans. Babrea walks in, shoots,
and he picks up his own rebound and
Zabo, and he's not happy about that. It was a late hit to hit from behind, and you see the players. During the course of the programme, we're going to look back at the past 30 years of ice hockey played by the Telford Tigers right here in the Telford Ice Rink. We'll meet some of the volunteers, some of the characters, and of course some of the players that have played hockey right here in Telford. Let's go and see who we can find. Over the past 30 years, there's been a number of general managers here at Telford Ice Rink. Paul Biffen was one of them, and we chatted to him about some of his memories of the players and ice hockey here in Telford.
Do you know what? I fell in love with ice hockey literally from the first game I saw. And Chuck, I got a lot of time for Chuck because he was a character. And I think one of the big things in, having moved on to Basingstoke, and I was involved, I was on the BHA, I was involved with the Heineken League, so I got heavily involved in ice hockey for somebody that couldn't play. Yeah. But Chuck, Kelsall, their names, that they were characters, and even 30 odd years later, their names still associated very, very strongly with Telford Tigers. And, I think it's, people say it's the memories. There were some great memories. This place with 2,000 people, it rocked. And, I could go out there into the community and say, this is the biggest thing in Telford. And at the time, it was the biggest thing in Telford. It put Telford on the map. And, a lot of credit should go to Chuck and to all the guys who were involved in putting Telford Tigers on the map. It's success breeds success. And yeah, exactly. And in those days, as you say, you had the Cal Lands that came across, the Mark Budds, the Chuck Taylors, some of the British players like the Alan Goulds, the Norman Pinningtons of this world, and then obviously it evolved. I think the second, third season, you had Salmon came in and Kevin Conway, and they came from Ayr. So, I wouldn't like to use the word circus because it sounds a bit derogatory, but sport is a bit like that. It's a bit like the Premier League in football. It's a circus, and the people move, they move around, they move for development, they move for more ice time, some move for a bit more money. But in those days, silly money certainly wasn't being thrown around. People were trying to at least run a business, but provide entertainment. And those great characters, and to me, the biggest thing ice hockey, I'm looking across now and there's no bar, but that bar was rammed every Saturday night. But the nice thing is, after the game, both sets of players were in that bar, they could talk to the fans. That relationship between the fan and the players, I don't know if it still exists, I hope it does, because that to me is one of the unique selling points of ice hockey. I work a lot now in professional football. Unfortunately,
there's no approachability.
There is no approachability. The guys, they all sit in their, their big black Jags and their big black Range Rovers with, smoked windows, and the reality is, they don't hardly want anything to do with the fans, but earning crazy money.
30 years ago, this was the manager's office, and Paul Biffen would look out at the ice hockey on the pad, and he could also see if there are any misbehaving Tigers on the public session.
I've got probably more people on Facebook from my generation of 30 odd years ago, and a lot of them, they were kids. They were the rink rats. They were the kids who were normally booting out the place. I can remember we got rid of Mark Hazelhurst, who was a lot bigger than me and still is. I can remember he's probably about a 14, 15-year-old who was being a pain. And basically, I remember we banned him. And he stood there, "You can't ban me." I said, "Yeah, until you learn to behave yourself in this rink." So I'm sure he'll appreciate that little story. But Norman Pinnington, and ironically, Norman came to Basingstoke. When I left to go to Basingstoke in '89, Tim Salmon came down with us, Norman Pinnington came, a few of the lads from the staff as well, like Ian and Neil.
30 years ago, Norman Pinnington was a session skater blasting around on the ice pad on a Friday night, till one of his friends suggested that he came and watched ice hockey. Let's find out how Norman became a Telford Tiger.
Well, the first time I set foot in Telford Ice Rink would have been probably January 1986, I believe. And I had a friend at school that used to tell me all the time about ice hockey. But I never came in for ice hockey, I came in to skate. And then that same friend, I was staying over at his on Wednesday night. I was going to his house to hang out to do homework.
As you do.
And and as I came past the rink, because you have to come across the rink, past the rink to go to Hollingswood, I heard a massive roar coming from the rink. Humongous. And because I was such a frequent flyer coming here skating, I kind of walked in. And just as I walked in, I came up on the bleachers. The Tigers scored and the whole building erupted, and I felt the wave just hit me, and I could just about see over the seats as I was looking in. Because Michael had always played it, the guy's name was Michael Lucas, he'd always played it, he's my best pal at school, and he was always playing it, and he was like, yeah, so next day I went to school, I'm like, yeah, I want to come. That Saturday, I came down to the rink, I stayed at his, came down to the rink, 6 o'clock we got here, 6 o'clock there on the ice, we were a little bit late, so I stood there, watched the whole thing. And I remember coming down, and the coach was Tom Sherd at the time, and he said to me, I came up and I said, I'd like to start to play. And he put his hand in my hair like that, give me a good shook in the head, and he went, sure thing, we'll see you next week at 6 o'clock. And I thought, that was easy. Little did I know the hard part was still to come. Mm-hmm. I turned up next week, and the rest of it was just go. I was like a dog chasing a bone. It's a learning curve. And I had in my corner, bless him, I had Andy Plant. He was equipment manager then, and he kind of took me under his wing a little bit, and I worked hard at practice, I worked hard whenever I got on the ice. My greatest abilities was I was able to skate. I could skate like the wind, and if I can skate and I can keep up with the best of them, to run interference and the guy that's got the puck and you're in front of him, or you can catch him and throw the body in the way, that's great, then you work on the other things. But the way hockey was tailored back in those days, it was a crash and bang, and you kind of saw the crash and bang, and I was built for crash and bang. And the finesse came a little bit later. As you grow older, like a fine wine, you seem to gauge more of how the game is played. You sit there for 2 seasons, you watch the guys in front of you, you watch how they play. You don't moan about it. For you youngsters out there now that think you've got the God-given right, you don't, right? And you just carry on. And that's what you used to do. So you watch the guy in front of you, and you sit there and you learn. So the 2 seasons I sat on the bench, I learned. And I learned in practice, and you keep on learning. So back in the day, the first hockey school I went on was £35 for the week, and you was on the ice the usual 6 a.m s, then the figure skaters, then the 10 a.m s, and then the afternoon. It was morning breakfast. I was always jerking around on hockey schools. So we finished our breakfast, and I'm skulking away because we had to come up and watch one of the old-time referees, bless him, he's passed away now, I forget his name. He'd come up and he gave talks on penalties, what you can and what you can't do, which was quite an important thing. Also on the sideline, he had his equipment selling as well, because he had a shop.
Jeff Kellen,
exactly. Yeah. So I thought, I don't fancy that. And I was hiding under the seats in the calf. And Tom Sherd, who's the coach then, and Dennis Kennedy, one of the other coaches, came in to have their breakfast. So I'm just trapped under the seat, kind of like thinking, I need to get out of here. So next thing you know, they start talking, and they're talking about the skaters that they have, and that my name popped up. And they said, yes, I remember Tom saying, like, yeah, that kid's got a lot of potential. And I thought, oh, okay. Later that night, I went home and asked my mum what potential was, and she put her hand in my hair. She went, don't worry about it, son, you ain't got none. And I was like, yeah.
As an ice hockey referee here in Telford, I spent many a game stood right here watching to see if the puck went in the back of the net, facing a barrage of abuse from Bloomer's corner. And one of the guys supporting us was Noel, who recorded all the scores on the game sheet. I had a chat to him about his memories of some of the referees that he worked with.
Yeah, Bob Brahmer. I like Bob Brahmer. You weren't so bad either, actually.
Well, Andy's shaking his head.
And Mickey Price.
Yeah.
Did a lot of games. Steve Harbour did a lot of games. Yeah, but I mean, they were all.
Because it was quite an intimidating place, wasn't it? Because back then, what was known as Bloomer's Corner,
yes.
You'd have to was the stood-up football fan element
yes.
of the game, and that was right by the referee's room.
Yes.
So presumably you were walking through that on the way
yes.
to the referee's bench. I bet you've seen
yes,
a few things.
I think it could be. Yeah, it was interesting. You did hear a few things. Perhaps questioning the referee's parentage. It did happen, but in the main, it was never an issue.
And it is one of those sports, isn't it, where players, referees, officials, everybody would then congregate in the bar at the end.
That's right. That's the great thing about hockey. The fans after the game, both sets of fans will we'll have a drink after the game. The referee will come in. Most of the players will come in. And yeah, it's a good atmosphere.
When you came up to the rink that first time to watch that exhibition game that Chuck put on, if somebody had said, "Oi, 30 years time, you'll still be here," you know, would you believe them?
No, I wouldn't. I didn't expect it. I don't think my wife expected it to last as long as it did. Because I spent a lot of time on the road with the Tigers as well. I used to go all the away games to some very strange and very interesting ice rinks.
What stands out for you in terms of interest in ice rinks?
Well, Blackpool. It was shaped like a bullet. It was flat at one end, square at one end, and semicircular at the other. Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth, the ice rink was on the first floor.
Yeah.
And it was tiny. It was the length of the Bournemouth rink was about the same width as the rink in Telford. It was bizarre. Chuck loved it down there. He'd shoot from behind the blue line and score. Fantastic.
And have you always been watching? You had some time away, right?
Yes, I think I was involved in it until they went bankrupt. I think about '99. Right.
Yeah.
And then I didn't.
You sort of stepped away.
Yeah, stepped away. I've been doing it for a long time. 15 years I've been doing it for, and I stepped away. There was no hockey, really, was there?
Yeah.
30 years ago, this was a long wooden bench. Noel would be filling out the score sheet, Roy would be playing the music in off cassette, and Mark would be operating the clock. It's changed somewhat now, as Rita, who currently does it, will electronically score the game as it goes. We chatted to her about some of her early memories of her favourite players.
Wayne Crawford, commonly known as Reggie, my ultimate all-time favourite. He was good on the ice. He was a really nice bloke. He came into the bar after the game. He'd mix with everybody. Nothing was too much trouble. He didn't have, he always made time to speak to everybody. Very, very nice personality. Really good. And I've still got a key ring with him on it.
What was it like the first time you met him to speak to him? Because that's the one thing with the players. They walk past and they're in the building, but to actually engage in a conversation.
Oh, I didn't know what to say, because to me, he was my hero at the time, and I thought, there's my hero talking to me. And he used to make a fuss of Daniel as well. And my other two, because you asked for three, my other two would be everybody. A lot of people would go for Tim Salmon and Kevin Conway. Yeah, very, very good. But my other favourite was Gerard Wasland. I'll never forget the first time I saw him skate. He'd arrived, I don't know who picked him up, brought him to the rink. I was working, and he was on the ice, and I was watching him, and I thought, my God, look at him skate. And I phoned my husband, who was then, phoned him up, and I said, I think you should come up here, because he used to watch the hockey. And he said, what for? I said, there's this new guy arrived. You want to see him skate? It was effortless, absolutely effortless. He was a joy to watch. Very, very good player. So Reggie and Gerard, I'd have back in a flash if they were still able and capable.
Time's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
When the trust formed, you literally got involved both feet in. What made you be part of that?
I wanted to see the team and the club, continue. And because they'd had a season out, and I'd actually gone for a walk from where I used to live up to a local pub, and I was sat outside because it was a summer, and Andy Phillips walked past, and I was just talking to him, and he was talking about the idea that him and Mike Dixon had got about forming the trust, and I said, well, any help you want, just let me know. I'm still here. Yeah.
And that was a turbulent time as well, wasn't it?
It was very, very, very limited budget. I mean, we used to start the season off quite well, then we'd have to let player go because of the money issues and whatever. But it was good. I mean, we had a decent board around us. We got Alan Gould in as chair. There was me. I can't remember a lot of them now. It's far too long ago. I'm too old. Memory box is full. When Wayne took over, we'd had these conversations beforehand, and then it was said that Wayne was coming to a meeting to talk to everybody. I unfortunately couldn't be present. I was picking my brother-in-law up from the airport. They agreed it. All, went through. There's been few turbulent bits and pieces, but generally, I personally think Wayne's the best thing that's happened to the club in recent years. He's done a lot. He's brought stability. Obviously, he wants to work to being a team and the club being sustainable, self-sustainable. But yeah, I mean, I love being. I'm not involved in the running of the club. Obviously, that's down to Red Hockey. But I go on the bench. I do the scoring. I'll be on the penalty box. If I'm not doing either of them, I'll be sat on the balcony watching the game. I like to go to a lot of the away games, mainly because if I am on the penalty box or scoring, you are watching the game, because obviously you've got to know what to write down. If the referee doesn't tell you, you've got to imagine what he's going to tell you. You're watching the puck and you're watching the ref. You're not watching the actual play. If that makes sense. And you can't get involved because you're supposed to remain impartial, which is very difficult. So I like to go to away games when I can. I haven't been to many the last few weeks due to injury, but so you can sit and relax and watch a game when you go to away games. There's no sort of running around getting referees to sign this and getting team managers to sign whatever, and I think a lot of people get involved because of their child, and a lot of people, they move up age groups with a child. Like, when I was with the Pee-wees, I was chair, I was secretary, I was treasurer, blah 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 blah, but I still carried on where Daniel finished. I mean, Daniel went to university up in Blackburn. That's how come he's got associated with them. And I just carried on just for the pure love of the sport and the club and the team. I'm Tigers through and through. And I think a lot of people know that. A lot of people.
This is where the Telford Tigers coach would stand and shout passionate instructions to his players, and Andy Plant was the trainer. He'd be taping up sticks, putting plasters on injured players, and we caught up with him about some of his fond memories as trainer of the Telford Tigers.
I think that the original trainer had been moved on, for a better word, and then I'd met Chuck Taylor. I'd also met a couple of guys who were doing reffing at the time, Arthur Wilson and Ian Wilson, the brothers. And Chuck said, I want the three of you to come into my office. And I went, okay. So I went in and he said, I'm looking for a new trainer. And we all stood there a little bit gobsmacked and didn't know what to say. And he asked us one or two questions and he said, okay, I've made my mind up. And told me it was me. It was, And I said, I hadn't got a clue what I've got to do. He said, you'll learn. And I did. I learned quickly.
What sort of things did you have to do when you first started out?
Well, it was just making sure that the guys were supplied with equipment. He'd got a fair amount of equipment there. Most of the players in those days had got their own equipment. And then it was like looking after the leg tape, stick tape, sticks, that kind of thing. It was...
And how long did you do that for?
Oh, God. Quite a few years, I couldn't tell you. So I went through quite a few coaches. The first coach who I worked with was Paul Kane, who I thought was an exceptional coach. He was really good. Bob Correll, another guy who I liked very much. Learned a lot from Bob, and it was Bob who set me on the road to doing the coaching with the kids.
Because your lads have gone through development.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that must have been an interesting challenge to coach a game that your only experience was your involvement working on the bench and watching.
Well, that was it. That's where I learned a lot about hockey, was being on the bench, listening to the players, listening to the coach, listening to people with experience like Chuck, and we had Vogie there, Cal Land, you know, people like that, loads of experience. Mark Budds, the great player. You know, it just rubs off on you. You can't help it. But when Bob said to me about doing the coaching, and I thought maybe not. But he says, we sat and had a chat, and he told me what he wanted me to do, and it was basically looking after the Tornadoes, who were then the under-21s. That's what I did, and I went and bought some books, and I learned a lot from books. I tried skates on. Found out I couldn't skate because of an old football injury on my ankle. It wasn't strong enough to support me on skates. So, but I learnt a lot, you know. And it's other people, like other coaches who you have in your life. Like Stan Marple was a big influence on Rick's career, anyway. But he, you know, I thought he was a really exceptional coach. He was really good.
And going back to those sort of early years of the Tigers, there must have been some amazing stories from bus trips and what have you. Some of the characters that you were with.
You know the saying, what happens in the dressing room stays in the dressing room. No, but we did have some fun. I can remember the one time we had Norman Pinnington was on the bench. Norman was only, about 15, dead keen he was. He was a cracking, or still is today, cracking lad. But I taped one of those little plastic paper cups to his head. Chuck saw it and he went, "You're up next, Norm. You're up next." You're skating out. He's got this paper cup on his head, skating around. That was funny. Ledgy, Paul O'Higgins, great coach. Another great coach. Rick today even swears by him. He says he's the biggest influence on his career. You know, we went to Slough one day. The day before, I'd bought a rabbit from the market, chopped the head off, skinned it, and I thought, I'll use the head. So Paul O'Higgins always said to me, "Pack my kid and bring it with you." And I said, yeah, all right. So got his skate, put this rabbit head in, down his skate, getting changed. He comes to put it on. Oh dear. It was just absolute uproar. It was brilliant.
This is the penalty box where some of the Telford Tigers on the wrong end of a referee's call would sit and serve their penalties. Chris Kelsall often volunteers to operate the door. I caught up with him and he brought along some memorabilia of the past 30 years of ice hockey right here in Telford.
My first ever ice hockey game, that's going back a long time now. I think, if I remember right, it was about January 1989. There was a load of us came over from Shrewsbury College, and we're playing Medway Bears not even in a league game. It was some kind of cup challenge or something, like, if I remember rightly. It was, as I said, we all actually downstairs in the corner underneath where Sliders is now. I think the game ended up 8-8 or something along that, because it's obviously a bit rusty now. And I thought after the third period, is that it? Game over? We were carrying on for a bit more, but it's like, no, mates just said off, no, that's it, we finished, it's 8-8 and that's it, we're off going. And it was just an exciting game. So decided I wanted to come and see a bit more of it, really. A couple of things we got on the table is, so they said back in sort of the late 80s, early 90s, the Tigers are actually sponsored by a local dairy. So they decided there were publicity milk bottles around and about. Living in Shrewsbury, we didn't actually get these, so trying to get hold of one when you live in Shrewsbury is quite hard, really. You actually picked this one up in Burnley, of all places. But Well, I was working there, so I suddenly left Shropshire in 1990 and started working for a hotel company. So I've lived all around the country over the years. And I was working in Burnley one morning on a breakfast shift. The milk got delivered, and this was in it. So I thought, thank you very much, I'll have that, because who else is going to have it in this town? So they don't know anything about it.
And you're no strangers to shirts, as we can say.
No, I'm not at all. I must have at least 50 shirts of Tigers over the years now. So it's from pretty much all of them are game worn as well, which is a nice thing.
And talk me through the one you're wearing now.
The one I've got now, I'd say, is either 86, 87 or 87, 88. It is an old one. And it's actually Jeff Smith, who used to be our goalie. So Alan Gould will remember it more than I do, so I would say, to be fair, on that one. But it is pretty much the one of the original shirts we ever had.
And the orange folder there is for the programme, right? Tell me
It is for the programmes, yeah. There's now a lot more than the social media, when people don't actually sort of have things to rest and get all the stats and stuff nowadays. But no, this was actually an original Tigers programme board. All you do is just pop your programme in the inside of it, so you had something to lean on if you sat in the crowd or just stood up to write the scores down every week.
And you had a programme every week?
I did have a programme every week, yes.
Filled it out?
Filled it out, and it's as actually has been in a recent Tigers programme. I've actually donated all mine now to the club to get some memories and stuff. So I know James has had a great good time in the office, flicking through them all, going back through all the memories.
As have I. Flicking through them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you saw your first game.
Yeah.
You sort of carried on watching. What was the thing that drew you into game after game after game?
Partly the atmosphere, because you still can't beat the atmosphere of the Tigers back in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, when the bleachers were down. But the goals, it was exciting. You always knew you were going to get a lot of goals, occasional fights, a lot more than we get nowadays. But it's just, I think it was the whole atmosphere of a Saturday night out at the hockey. It was just, you just couldn't beat it. It was much better than sitting in watching telly, that's for sure.
Over the past 30 years, we've seen a number of local businesses supporting ice hockey right here in Telford. One of those early sponsors was Furrows. Bill Cooper was involved in the deal.
Right, the catalyst for that was a boss that just loved to try anything that was new. And at the time I was working as a sales manager for the Furrows group, and my boss, a fella called Alec Owen, had an approach by Gary Newbon and Dave Ismay for this ice hockey club they were setting up in Telford. And Alec was always very keen on anything that was new. He was terribly enthusiastic, and he was very enthusiastic about the growth of Telford. And he thought this would be a good opportunity for us to get involved. What Gary was seeking at that time was to attract sponsorship in the way of a vehicle for their star player and coach, Chuck Taylor. I knew very little about ice hockey. I don't think Alec knew a great deal about ice hockey either. But I think Gary and Dave, between them, were pretty persuasive. And we decided to get involved and provide Chuck with his first car. For that, we received 4 tickets to attend all home games. And I can remember me coming along to the first evening where the Tigers won the game. There was blood all over the ice. The atmosphere was just unbelievable, and I have to say I was hooked, and we were hooked from that moment on.
And the association with Furrows grew. I mean, I can remember you having logos on the Zamboni, providing cars for players. So that was a catalyst to quite a long relationship, wasn't it?
Absolutely. A terrific relationship. And the Zamboni one was quite funny, really, because we were always looking for the best spot to advertise. And one night we were just sat there between periods, and the Zamboni's going round. You just thought, you know what, people are sat here, they've got nothing else to look at but this machine. We need our name on the machine, and that's what we did at that particular time.
And I mean, you became on the board in the end, didn't you? Or a president?
Well, I was on the board for a period of time after the Tigers went through some difficulties at the end of the 80s, and there was a new company formed in 1990. The directors of that company were myself, Chuck, Ish Patel, also Mike Taylor, yes, and Jerry O'Reilly. I think you know, we were all persuaded by Chuck that we couldn't allow ice hockey to die in Telford at that particular time, and I think it would be fair to say that the driving force of that team of people would probably be Ish Patel, and I think that actually the Tigers owe a lot to Ish for that period of time and everything he did for the club, because he was instrumental in getting the whole thing going again. I can only describe it like this. I've been to Wembley on many occasions, the old Wembley, when it's been full and the atmosphere has been electric. Not when I've been watching my team, West Brom, obviously, but when I've been there with other teams. But this rink, full, at that particular time, the atmosphere was greater. It was unbelievable, just unbelievable. You felt like the roof was going to come off the place, and it was absolutely fantastic, you know. It really was.
And obviously you came and watched the first couple of games with your boss and that. When you went back to work and discussed whether you'd made the right decision to get involved in those early days, how did those conversations go?
Well, I think it was interesting because, you know, hockey has a degree of violence to it, but the violence is on the ice. And I suppose in a sense it's controlled to a degree, or it was most of the time. It was family entertainment. Families were arriving at the rink. There was a complete cross-section of people. I think it crosses right the way through all the classes in society. And at the time, for our business, we were looking to appeal to all people, and this just ticked all the boxes.
And there were a number of other sponsors involved as well at the time, wasn't it? I mean, it's fair to say, in the early years, it was quite a thing to be associated with.
Oh, absolutely, definitely. You know, and I think we were in the business of selling and repairing cars. And I have to say, you know, we had a number of our people that started to attend matches as the fever sort of grew. A number of our sales staff, two in particular, Peter Croft, whose son went on to do great things here.
Daniel played, still is playing.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it was Peter and another fellow called Tony Head, and the amount of business they used to do through the ice hockey club and the people that attended these matches was fantastic.
I bought these 3 cars off Tony Head.
So there we go.
Alan Gould came from the northeast of the Telford Tigers and was one of the first guys to put the puck in the back of the net. We've chatted to him about some of his memories of playing for the Telford Tigers and being captain.
Well, I came to Telford originally just as a day out with Peter Graham, who was the Tigers' first netminder. His brother Davey was playing at Solihull, and Peter got to know Chuck Taylor through the connection at Solihull. And I came down, so wow, relatively new ice rink. You know, nice setup, saw the changing rooms, the facilities and everything. And I spoke to Chuck in the bar after we'd had a skate one lunchtime, and he said, yeah, come down, we've got a training camp going on in the end of July, August 85, and I came down and ended up staying here. The highs have got to be, you know, we the championship season, of course, but when we first started out here, nobody knew what the squad would be like. You know, we were all a bunch of guys from Liverpool, from Sheffield, a couple of us from up in Whitley Bay, and a few other guys from here, there and everywhere, and it was uncertain how we would be. We went out in our first game, we won, and the success continued from there. So it was kind of nice coming from playing for a team in the Heineken Premier League, as it was back then up at Whitley Bay. We weren't winning so much, the odd game here and there, to a winning team, and after a few weeks you thought, wow, this is really, really great. Yeah, the odd loss came in, and it was a lot of hard work as well, because it was more intense training. We're on the ice nearly every day to start with, and then 3 or 4 times a week. So, you know, it does take it out of you. You did get very, very tired, but all of a sudden you appreciate why you're doing that, because the fitness levels go up and the wins continue.
And just talk about a little bit about how the town of Telford was back in that time. I mean, there was no bowling alley. There was a field next to the ice rink between us and the shopping centre. It's changed massively in the last 3 decades, hasn't it?
The big key thing for us, and a lot of the guys will tell you this, was Cascades. the nightclub Cascades. We all had passes, VIP passes, so we didn't have to pay and go in there. And there was a few controversial stories about players being in there, you know, the night before a game maybe, or whatever, made front page news with the Shropshire Star at some point as well. But yeah, the town centre's developed a lot. We used to train early in the morning here, and we used to love a £1 breakfast upstairs in the Carrefour restaurant, which, you know, a lot of people remember as well. But yeah, massive change. We had use of the facilities. We used to go swimming to the dry ski slope and everything, and really enjoyable.
So you gave Peter Graham a lift to Telford. If anybody had said to you, you'll still be there 30 years later, that day when you set out to drive him down, what would you have said to him?
Well, definitely not. I mean, my situation at home was I was working in the shipyards, and you get sort of 3 or 4 months' work, then you got laid off for a month, and I'd been laid off. I wasn't doing anything. And when I came down here and, you know, agreed to come back down for the training camp, I sort of did a little bit more research. And after a couple of months of being here, I was with Andy Steele. We went down to Halesfield and we just started walking around the industrial areas, knocking on doors. What do you make here? Do you have any jobs? Because the Tigers, we got a little bit of money, but it wasn't enough to live on. And the employment opportunities here, back in '85 were sky high, so I ended up getting a job with a company that I stayed with for 25 years. But my initial thoughts were, well, I'll come down for a few months, have a good time, and then probably go home when the shipyards call me again, but it just never happened.
And when you think back of some of the fun times and the pranks that happened in the dressing rooms and on the bus trips, are there any particular things that stand out for you as sort of laugh out loud moments that you'll carry with you?
Yes.
Are you going to share a couple?
Well, I mean, I don't know what the audience is going to be here, because I don't know. There's
call it a family show.
You know, there's the kind of, and Mr. Scholes will hate me mentioning this, but of course there's the eyebrow shaving, the equipment manager and the assistant. It's a tradition that probably still goes on today, you know. Dr. Kelsall on the bus, he's made guys stand up all the way from Glasgow, wouldn't let them sit down. I've seen fun and antics in hotels in Murrayfield where lifts have been jammed between floors and beer poured through the crack of the door at other guests that were waiting to get into the lift. The list goes on, but let's say what happened on away trips stays on away trips. Yeah, it was a hard decision to make, but I actually stayed away from the rink for about 12 or 13 years. I brought my son up a couple of times skating on a public session, and that was about it, you know. And then, as you say, I came back, got involved with the trust through Andy Phillips and Mike Dixon. And a bit of advice to anybody that thinks they can run a club.
Wow.
Oh, dear me, dear me.
Was it a massive learning curve for you? Were there lots of things that you had no clue about until it landed on your doorstep to do the job?
We had a plan. You know, Andy Phillips and Mike Dixon, who I mentioned, had worked very hard. There was a business plan put together. We went down to league meetings. We were accepted into the league as the 10th team then. And yeah, we said we'll go out and we'll knock on doors, we'll raise money. But, you know, we knocked on a lot of doors, and a lot of doors closed very quickly in our faces. And we realised, you know, sort of 2/3 into the first season, yeah, we had some sponsorship coming in, but it really wasn't enough. And this, you know, the big coup was signing Tom Watkins as well. Down in Ironbridge, Mike Dixon and I met Tom. We wanted to be away from the ice rink, so no media would see, so, you know, there'd be no whispers going around. So we did the signing down in Ironbridge over a beer or two. And it was heartbreaking for me as a chairman at the time, because one of my first things I had to say to Tom was, after several weeks, you're going to have to slash somebody from the squad because the budget is not coming in to sustain the wages that we need to pay out. And I felt sorry for Tom for a couple of years because he had his eye on great things, and as the chairman of the trust, I couldn't support him financially. So that's very difficult, and I understood where Tom was coming from as a former player.
This is the Tigers dressing room, and has been since the very first day of ice hockey in Telford, when a man called Chuck Taylor had an idea about bringing the sport to the town.
I was in Solihull, and the initial idea was to start the club. I was going to be the director of players and still play in Solihull, and my whole plan for it was to have 2 teams. So Telford initially being, because we weren't going to be in the top flight, was to be the feeder team, or a farm team as we would have called it in Canada at that time. And then it sort of coincided with the time that Gary Newbon quit at Solihull as the chairman because he was busy with his TV commitments, and another chap came in as the chairman. I explained what I want. He read something sinister into it. Didn't want to proceed with that, and I thought, well, if that's the vision for this club, then I'd rather start again, and ended up going as a player director.
And so there was a rink in Telford when you first went knocking on the door, but no hockey?
No hockey. The rink, well, they just built the rink. It was about a year before. The Telford Development Corporation built the rink, sold it to the council for, I think, £1. Good deal if you can get it. Therefore, we went over and looked at it. And a guy by the name of John Lowther was in charge then, who was a top man, absolutely helped us out immensely in the first year. He was largely the reason that it all happened, really.
And when you look at that time as well, the town embraced the sport, didn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, they were excited about it, but that didn't happen by accident either. I mean, we pounded the pavement and got, we had a press conference. We went and spoke to the Shropshire Star. It was Roy Williams at the time, so we got it out. And Eleanor Aldroyd was BBC Radio at that time as well. So we got everybody involved and made them feel part of the club in the sense of, like, we would give them all the information they wanted, access everywhere, because really that's the only way to get the thing on the map. And once people came, we were convinced that they would be hooked on it because it's exciting. I still think in my heart it's the best sport on the planet. It's the fastest, it's the fastest contact sport in the world, and people can come with their families. And certainly at that time there was a problem with football, with hooliganism and things, and people were shying away from football a bit, looking for other things. I know American football was big at the time as well, basketball. So people were looking for things to go to. So we were confident once we got them there, we could keep them.
And there were some great sponsorship deals. I mean, Chris Kelsall bought in one of those logo milk bottles that ended up on everybody's breakfast table.
Yeah, well, we did all kinds of things. We also got involved with the local football teams. Shrewsbury and Wolverhampton were involved with us as well, just doing things together. So there was always football people. We tried to get other sportsmen in at the games and all kinds of promotional things we did. We were open to do anything as long as it promoted the game.
How easy was it to set up a team in a town that didn't have any players? Because when you first went there, nobody could skate.
Well, I went around and I basically went scouting players. I brought over, obviously, the first imports that was easy because I knew them.
So we've met some of the characters involved in ice hockey right from the start over the last 30 years in Telford. There are more characters to meet next time on Made in Birmingham. Silverthorne off the boards, gets the break, goes with it. Silverthorne puts it onto the back post. Puts it into the back post, and it goes forward from Macaulay Haywood, having the right hand over the top, throwing it in, and Miller's going toe to toe, and he's got 3 or 4 headshots, and then drags it down. Still has it. Zarbo being sort of marked out the game by Tom, and the shot comes from forward now. Babrea with plans. Babrea walks in, shoots,
and he looks up his own rebound and
Zarbo, and he's not happy about that. It was a late hit to hit from behind, and you see the players